I thought I was cleaning out my mother's kitchen. I was wrong. I was sorting through every meal she ever made, every holiday she carried, and every version of her I was not ready to let go. I walked in with cardboard boxes, trash bags, and a plan to be practical. 3 hours later, I was sitting at her kitchen table crying over a chipped yellow coffee mug because grief has a way of hiding inside the smallest things. So if you are grieving right now or sorting through someone's home, be gentle with yourself. This kind of work is not just physical, it asks questions you did not know you were avoiding. Today I am sharing the 9 things cleaning out my mother's kitchen taught me about memory, guilt, grief, and what I do not want to leave behind for the people who will someday have to sort through my life. Number 9. The things used every day told the truth about her life. Not the pretty things in the cabinet, the worn things by the sink, the things she reached for without thinking. I thought I would want the good china, the crystal glasses, the serving pieces she pulled out twice a year and told us not to touch when we were children. But the first thing that undid me was her chipped yellow coffee mug, the one by the sink, still sitting exactly where she left it, the one she used every morning while the house was still quiet. That mug had no resale value. Nobody at an estate sale would have looked at it twice, but it had held more of my mother's real life than the whole china cabinet, because that was the cup that knew her mornings. Before that day, I thought important things looked important. Now I know some of the most important things look ordinary because they were loved every day, not displayed for company twice a year. Number 8. Her handwriting felt like hearing her voice in the room again. I was not prepared for how powerful a recipe card could be when the person who wrote it no longer stands beside you in that kitchen. I found her recipe box in the second drawer, tucked behind a stack of old dish towels. The cards were yellowed, stained and soft at the corners, like they had been handled through 100 Sunday afternoons. One card said, "Add more salt, no matter what the book says." I laughed and cried at the same time because I could hear exactly how she would have said it. A typed recipe would not have done that to me. Her handwriting did. The little loops, the crossed out measurements, the bossy notes in the margins. I kept the recipe cards because they were not just instructions. They were proof that her hands had been there, feeding us in her own stubborn way, correcting every cookbook she disagreed with. Number 7. The cabinet full of just in case was really a cabinet full of fear. And once I saw it that way, I stopped laughing at it and started seeing the history behind the habit. My mother kept butter tubs, Cool Whip containers, bread bags, glass jars, twist ties, and lids that matched absolutely nothing in the known world. At first, I almost laughed, then I stopped, because I understood what I was looking at. That was not mess. That was the memory of not having enough. Women of her generation did not throw useful things away easily. A container was not just a container, it was insurance against tomorrow, and maybe against a time when stores, money, or luck could not be trusted. I kept a few that were actually useful, but I did not keep the whole cabinet. I do not have to inherit every fear that shaped her, and neither do I have to call that fear love. Number 6. The grocery list showed me the invisible work nobody thanked her for. They were not sentimental objects, but they told the truth. In one drawer I found old grocery lists, coupons, receipt envelopes, and scraps of paper with tiny math in the margins, the kind nobody sees until the kitchen is being packed up. It looked like clutter until I slowed down. Chicken, potatoes, milk, coffee. Crossed out, rewritten, added up, reduced. Every little list was a record of a woman trying to make enough out of what she had. Nobody frames a grocery list. Nobody calls it family history. But those scraps showed me the quiet mental labor that held our house together for decades, without anyone calling it work. It always falls to women, does it not? Remembering who eats what is almost gone, what bill is due, what meal can stretch one more day, while making it look effortless to everyone else. If you are finding this helpful, a quick subscribe means you will not miss the next one. Next video, I am showing how I set up my whole home so the house helps me instead of draining me. Number 5, some things were memories. Some things were assignments. That was the sentence I needed, because not every inherited object asks the same thing from you, and not every object deserves the same answer. I held her big holiday platter for a long time. The one she used for Thanksgiving, Christmas, church dinners, and every meal where she carried more than anybody noticed, including me. At first I thought, I should keep this. Then I realized I did not actually want the platter. I wanted permission not to become the woman responsible for every holiday. That was the moment I understood the difference. A memory says, remember me. An assignment says, become me. And at 52, I am learning that I do not have to become every woman who came before me, even the ones I love. I kept the memories. I did not keep every assignment. And I think my mother, on her most honest day, would have understood. She knew better than anyone how heavy some roles become when nobody else volunteers to carry them. Number 4, one token can carry as much love as the whole set. This was the lesson that finally made the donation boxes feel less cruel and more like a way to choose with care. There was a set of mixing bowls in the cabinet, 5 bowls, nested together, heavy and awkward, and honestly more than I had room for in my own kitchen or my own life. But the small blue one was the bowl she used for whisking eggs, mixing pancake batter, and tossing sliced apples with cinnamon. I could see her hands around it. So I kept the blue bowl and let the rest go, not because the others meant nothing, but because memory does not require volume. Love does not become stronger by taking up more shelves. Sometimes one object is enough to hold the story. One bowl, one mug, one recipe card, one thing your hand can actually reach for and use. Number 3, guilt is not a storage system. I wish someone had told me that before I started trying to pack guilt neatly into cardboard boxes. This one hurt. I packed and unpacked her heavy stand mixer 3 different times. It was expensive. It was good quality. It had been hers. But I knew the truth. I would not use it. I do not bake that way. I do not have the counter space. I was not keeping a mixer. I was keeping guilt, and guilt is a very poor reason to give something space in your home. So I donated it to someone who would use it, and that changed something in me. An object is better honored in use than buried in my cabinet out of obligation, where it would only make me feel guilty every time I opened the door. Number 2, you cannot store your grief in a box. You can tape it shut for a while, but grief has a way of waiting for you, especially in the places you thought you had hidden it. At one point, I started taping up a box of things I did not want, did not need, and would probably never open again. I knew it while I was doing it, but I was too tired to admit it out loud. I wrote "keep on the outside" because I could not bear to write "donate." But the truth was, I was not keeping those things. I was postponing the crying and pretending that storage was the same thing as healing. Grief is patient. It will wait for you in the attic. It will wait in the garage. It will wait inside a box you labeled "keep" because your heart was too tired to decide. So I made an unsure box instead. Not a forever box, a mercy box. A place for the few decisions I genuinely could not make that day without pretending I had solved them. Number 1, you cannot keep a season of life by keeping everything from it. That is the hardest sentence in this whole video, and I wish it were not true, because if it were possible, I would have kept the whole kitchen. I wish this were not true. I wish keeping the table meant one more Sunday dinner in that kitchen, one more cup of coffee there, one more ordinary afternoon before everything changed. But the kitchen taught me something hard. A whole life is not in every object equally. Some things carry love, some things carry habit, some things carry fear, some things carry nothing but dust. When I finally accepted that, I stopped asking what would make me feel less guilty. I started asking what truly helps me honor that part of her life with love, instead of carrying it through guilt. That question changed everything. I kept the mug, the recipe cards, the blue bowl, and one towel worn thin from years of her hands, because that was enough to recognize her. Not everything, but enough to remember her honestly. And then I looked around at the boxes in the hallway and thought about my own children. I do not want them to need a dumpster to find my love someday. I do not want them to sort through guilt disguised as dishes. I do not want them to wonder which objects mattered and which ones I simply never had the courage to release. A home should be a place to live your next chapter, not a storage unit for your guilt. That is what my mother's kitchen taught me, even though she never said the words. Which object was hardest for you to let go of after someone you loved moved, downsized, or life changed? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and I know this one may bring up stories. And next time, I am taking this lesson into my own home. I am showing the systems I use now so my house feels calmer, cheaper, and easier to manage, because I do not want my own home to become a burden dressed up as love. I will see you there, and until then, be gentle with the things you are carrying. Some of them are heavier than they look, and you do not have to set them down all at once.